It's just devoid of entertainment and stuff like that. But we're gonna read another book, right? One thing that we're gonna investigate as we do it is what accent you read this in. Richard Pryor's an African American comedian. We all know Richard Pryor, don't we? Do you know what I mean? You're probably thinking of Eddie Murphy or James Brown. But no, this is Richard Pryor. Anyway, so do we read it in our accent or do we read it in an African American accent? Could we read it in like an Icelandic accent just to see what happened? But there's really no rules. Don't want to overcomplicate the thing, but I'll just read a book. It's very cleverly called Prior Convictions, because he was a bit of a naughty boy. Old Richie, like he was fond of the pipe one day, like so. There's a few of our fellows in the community are also seemingly not endorsing it. Anyway, we'll take it from the top of page 127. Right here. Both Shine knew you could also party their ass off. Cecil Brown, who wrote the novel The Life and Loves of Mr. Jiva's Nigger, told some of the earthiest, most entertaining stories ever around 3 a.m. Through Cecil I met Claude Brown, the author of Man-Child of the Promised Land, and Reed, who impressed me as one of the most honest people I've met. By comparison, I was uneducated and ignorant, though listening to their ideas inspired me just as Malcolm X's writings have. I wanted to do something. One night I served as the disc jockey on a radio station, playing mild and rambling on about Nixon, the Vietnam War, the Black Panthers and shit. I didn't know anything about that shit, but who better to talk about it? Then I got the idea I could write. For a time I holed up in my house and wrote, fueled by coke, coffee, cigarettes and alcohol. I cranked out page after page of stories containing ideas and opinions that I thought were important. I'm a serious motherfucker, I told myself. Finally I got the guts to show my work to Reed. He sent it back with a note. Man, this ain't my language. Well, that stopped my attempt at serious writing cold. He could have said, motherfucker, you can't write. But he made it hard. He was cold, and as I said, honest. So, here's Pryor only after praising this guy. Not to his face, like, but it's more or less like this is one of the best guys around, like. A few days later, sends him a wee message on Instagram. What do you think of this tune that I knocked up here? The guy's just like, you shouldn't be making music, mate. Or YouTube videos, let's say. Or poetry, or playing the harmonica. I can understand that to an extent, because there's a certain style of poetry that come about, right? They're known affectionately as the bingo poems. My friend sort of originated them, and I've done a few myself, like, he told me they weren't bad. But all sorts of, like, our mates started then trying to write these bingo poems. Now the trick was, it was actual poetry, like you kind of had to be a bit of a poet in order to get away with writing these. These guys were just coming and trying bits and bobs and stuff. And I think my friend, although he was sort of flattered that, this thing was taking off, he had to suspect at least one of his very close confidants as having had used AI in order to write the poem, because he was putting out this novice stuff, and then one day he came back with this poem that was like Shakespeare or something. He's like, oh, I wrote that poem today. It's a bit suspicious, isn't it? But anyway, that's nothing to do with Richard Pryor, so we'll get on. I heard that Shelley was hanging out with Miles. I don't think they were lovers, but just that they were spending their time together reminds me of women get their heart broke, they cry. Men don't do that. Men hold it in like it don't hurt. They walk around and get hit by trucks. So you can see why his mate sort of said to him, "You're not much of a writer. Like, stick to the comedy, Richard, because you are one of the best at that. I'm not taking that away from you, like, but as for the poetry and shit, just leave it to the. Do you know what I mean? It's like in boxing, right? See if there happened to be somebody come out and try to speak real eloquent and dress with that sartorial elegance that English Eubank Senior did. It would just be so obvious that it was like this guy was ripping it off, and it would be made all the more conspicuous by its inadequacy, you know what I mean, as any form of artistic sort of expression. So anybody with any sort of sense about them wouldn't try it, you know. They wouldn't last anyway. Although I would say that he has been influential in that respect. I think Barry McGuigan's quite fluent, smart guy. Whatever you say about his morals, you know, good fighter too. Yeah, I like McGuigan. I like Frampton too. I like McGuigan. You know, just send your complaints to the appropriate, junk folder. Who else is there? Garth A. Davis. Well, he's not a boxer, but he is quite elegant. Of course, Muhammad Ali. He was kind of on a different level too, because he was almost sacrificing himself. He was like a martyr to his cause. And luckily enough, he had that way with words. I come across a whole ream of videos before he had his first real breakthrough with his, super charismatic interview, and the many of those that followed, there were loads of trial runs where he was learning to, Cassius Clay. So, I suppose you can learn anything. I'm trying to think who else is eloquent. I mean, there's a lot of eloquent people in boxing. Usually more the pundits than would be the actual fighters. I'm sure there's a few there that are just escapingly. A few guys that have said really memorable things. Prince Nassim, I don't know if you would call him a poet by speech. Obviously, a nice pirouette in the squared circle's something else altogether. I certainly wouldn't deny him that early, nor would anybody, I think. Well, half a good eye in their head, but as a speaker, I think he was essentially, charismatic. He definitely had something. He had something special going for him. If he was just a flashy fighter, would it have been the same? If he didn't have that same charisma as a person, would he be that flashy fighter? Who knows? Let's see what Richard has to say about it. I was so pissed off about Shelley and Miles that I walked into the pawn shop, bought a trumpet, and blew on a street corner outside an Italian restaurant. Only I didn't know how to play the trumpet. Not a fucking note, but I blew the motherfucker as if the shrill, discordant sounds that went screaming into the darkness would let everyone know how unhappy I felt inside. See, that's a legitimate, nice bit of literature there, and a wee bit of prose you can have it. So it's just as well that his mate said to him, obviously this guy's been doing it for a while, and he knew how to get the right reaction out of him. You don't praise somebody who's obviously got great talent, but is nowhere near their potential. Everybody's different, and it gets simplified with Alex Ferguson, card and sticker or whatever. Like, do you know what I mean? He's a man for the horses, wasn't he, Fergie? Like, so he would be checking the form, I suppose, and things like that. Then Bill Cosby, of all people, walked out of the restaurant to see who was playing such shit. He had to have figured out it was someone real avant-garde or a terrorist. He looked stunned to see me. "Mom, what are you doing?" he asked. "Playing the trumpet." "No, you aren't," he said. "You're making everybody in the restaurant sick." Bill invited me to join him inside, where he was eating with two of the tallest, prettiest white women I'd ever seen. I thought, damn, wouldn't you know? But after a while, one of those Amazon beauties gently stroked my leg underneath the table. I looked across the table at Bill and said to myself, sick my ass, man, that trumpet shit worked. And I guess that really comes back to what I was saying. I didn't set that up right away. About the harmonica, going into career in music, you know. I'm sure boxing, I'm sure, you know, there's similar gains to be had, like, you know what I mean? Depends what your motivations are. And if your motivations are animalistic, you might at times behave like an animal. That's Mike Tyson, yeah? Something of the poet himself. Good night.